talking about the future of artificial intelligence. Now we will bring all of those leading minds together to share out how the future of artificial intelligence will impact K-12, K-16, and all formal education. Please welcome back to the stage Michael Matsuda, Neil Sahota, Adrian Posner, Joseph Zaki, and joining us for the first time today, Dr. Michael and Thomas. Dr. Thomas is a space expert specializing in program management and business operations for complex space systems. She is on a mission to make rocket science affordable in efforts to create equitable access to space for new and existing satellite providers. Moderating today's panel is Mr. Matt Horton. Mr. Horton is the director at the Milken Institute's Center for Regional Economics and California Center. Mr. Horton's programmatic work at the Institute is focused on identifying a variety of financial tools, public policies, and collaborative models that leaders can deploy to increase investments in education, community development, housing, employment, and other areas supporting human capital and place-based economic development. Please put your hands together for this world-class panel on artificial intelligence.
Hi, thanks. Is Adam still in the room? Adam, raise your hand from the panel. I have an idea for you. How many parents in the room? So while Adam was talking about the shushing model, all I could think about is how I could easily apply that same to get my kids to take another bite. So Adam, if you need another business idea, an app to get your kids to take another bite is, I think, a parent tech gem. So here, while I pull up my notes, are the slides? There we go. So I'm Matt Horton. I'm a director at the Milken Institute's Center for Regional Economics and California Center. And for those that aren't familiar with the Milken Institute, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, which is a lot of fun. And our work and my work, as the announcement said, really focuses on public policy in really three key areas: the talent pipeline, housing, infrastructure, and kind of workforce in general as kind of a means to look at economic development. And we do a number of research that I think kind of informs this conversation that you can take a look at on our website. One is an annual report that we put out on best performing cities. And another is a biannual report that we do on state tech and science, which measures investments in higher education and things like that. But really more directly, I think, related to the concepts and themes that are throughout this conversation today. And I think one of the reasons why Michael asked me to be here today is right before the pandemic, we put out a report around preparing California for the future of work, which really took a look at identifying the prospect for enhancing access to skills and broader economic attainment as the future of work begins to unfold. And that premise around the future of work, the scary aspects of automation that's going to come and take away all of our jobs, was really kind of demystified for us in terms of like jobs that can be automated will be, and what our challenges associated with that dynamic unfolding is really not just upskilling, but providing enhanced access throughout the talent pipeline in terms of uncovering that equity dynamic that we've heard about here. Later on in the pandemic, we released another report that was kind of inspired by that, which was about recalibrating the workforce dynamic, which again, and you'll see at the end of these few slides here before we get to Dr. Thomas, really highlighted a lot of the themes here that everybody's working around and should be applauded around as a really living, breathing best practice around the future of work. So I commend your efforts. So just to provide a few data points as we get into this conversation around equity and the prospects for public policy and investments in the talent pipeline that you're all working around. When we talk about access and the jobs and labor market, especially in California, we see that higher attainment leads to higher wages and higher living standards, by no surprise. And those higher wages and higher living standards are really concentrated around STEM and STEAM careers and STEM and STEAM kind of education investments and curriculum that we're all talking about here today. So especially around computer science and agriculture, architecture, engineering, excuse me. So what does that mean when we talk about the best practices around AI and digital skills and digital skills access and enhancing those roadmaps and frameworks around employer engagement, around certification and certificate models is really the question about scale. And again, it's no surprise to what everybody's working on here in this room, which is the prospect for our further dialogue on the panel. And just to get a better sense of how this breaks down, we see the variance between other kind of sectors and education levels based on industry and sectors. And again, not that this is revelatory to people in this room, but the really three key aspects that we center on in terms of the future of work is, how do we increase workforce participation? How do we accelerate the adjustments in workforce development programs to keep pace with these developing skills, which you're all seeing here today? And then how do we invest moving forward in the regional talent pipelines that kind of imbue those pipelines with the ability to adapt and engage and partner with industry sector leaders? So, with that, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Thomas, who I know has some really insightful remarks here about the diversity, equity, and inclusion aspects, and thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here and seeing friendly faces that I recognize, and I really appreciate the warm welcome, and I'm just so honored to be sitting on the stage with these incredible human beings. So my name is Lynn, and I'm an executive leader at Virgin Orbit, located in Long Beach, California. So I just wanted to touch just very briefly, just a couple of minutes, about AI from my perspective and how I do believe it's truly intertwined in everything that we do across many industries, including education. But just to look at the photos, on this particular slide here, on the left, that's an actual footage from my company's most recent launch. So the airplane at the top is called Cosmic Girl, and that is our flying launch pad. It's a converted 747. And we strapped that rocket that you see below there, called Launcher 1, underneath the wing of that aircraft. And our chief pilot had just released this particular rocket, and it was on its way to space, and we successfully deployed several NASA small payloads that were developed by students. And so there's a lot of AI and machine learning that goes into space. And on the right there, that is an actual photo that was nestled on our Launcher 1 rocket that took a picture of one of the satellites before deployment into space, before it reached its orbital destination. So that's just a little bit about what I do. And so this I call my academic and career constellation, and I won't bore you with all of the details, but I have a really unique pathway to engineering, or particularly STEM. However, even when I was getting my Bachelor of Arts degree in political science, my MBA, my Doctor of Education, and most recently my Master of Science degree in Space Systems Engineering, AI and machine learning played a huge role in all of that. And I worked primarily on the business side of the house within aerospace, but I was still responsible to develop homegrown tools, things that you wouldn't necessarily think a political scientist or an MBA student or graduate would normally do. But again, AI, machine learning is so ingrained into everything that we do. And so when I was at Johns Hopkins University, I particularly, I had a few areas of study, but one area of study that I did very in-depth research on was machine learning, which is a subset of artificial intelligence, or AI. And with that, I learned how deep it really runs. I particularly looked at how social media platforms use various machine learning algorithms to accept or debunk misinformation or information. But I quickly realized how that's uniquely intertwined in many things that we do. So I wanted to kind of frame an issue that I think we have. We are surrounded by so much data, and if we haven't already, we don't have enough humans on the planet to process that data. So what does that mean? I would argue that it means that every single person, regardless of what discipline you are in, will have some role in how to process data and how to automate data. And that's where the AI comes into play. So I know you've been here all day, and I got here not too long ago, but I just wanted to kind of frame from my perspective, what is artificial intelligence and what is machine learning. And with AI, it's really the transfer of human intelligence to machines. And so it's really driven by humans. And I want that to resonate, because I think a lot of people believe that everything's going to be run by robots. And that is, we have to distinguish between the sci-fi and the science. And so, machine learning is the fundamental part of AI as it pertains to the process of learning from data sets over time. So how does the data get better? How do we get smarter? And so I think this has been talked about, but again, because AI is driven by humans, we have to ask ourselves, how biased are we? Because that's what's going to program what it is that we need to do in order to keep pushing forward. And trends of the future, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but essentially there are billions of dollars that are being invested right now in AI across many industries. That is a huge opportunity for anyone, especially folks in education, to really take hold of this huge opportunity. And I also wanted to touch on military applications. Sometimes we always think of, for-profit or different things like high-tech Google, but the military is also looking really heavily into AI and how they use it to protect our nation. And I'll end there on that note, but I do thank this panel for giving me just a few minutes to introduce myself and just to kind of give you my view of the world through AI.
No, that's fantastic. And I was talking with Adrian at lunch a bit about how this conversation intersects, Dr. Thomas, with especially sectors in defense and in military that require a domestic workforce. Like, where do you see the prospects for scaling this type of AI program, especially as it relates with industry leaders like yourself?
Sure. Well, I think it starts in the classroom. It starts at a very young age. It starts with, teaching kids that, I have 2-year-olds that can navigate my iPhone, and it's really how do you operationalize that and how do you build that into your curriculum so that kids can understand that this is something that they can do for a living and it doesn't have to look so traditional.
Yeah. Do you see best practices around this dynamic working in other parts of the country that you can point to, and that question, I think, to other folks?
I'm happy to answer, unless if somebody wants to jump in here. I don't want to dominate the time.
No, they've all spoken.
Okay. Yes, so, one thing about technology, which is really cool, it creates a borderless society. So I do think that this is something to where it does open up the world of possibilities to do more international business, which really helps all of us. But also, too, it opens up the doors through an educational perspective, because now we have more opportunities to learn how to learn and how to educate.
Joseph, when we had the call a little bit earlier this week just to talk about some of the themes here, you kind of came at this from a different angle around maybe how we engineer different types of incentives to bring in industry leaders like yourself. Do you want to talk a little bit about that insight?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about creating an AI workforce, and for us at Loco, we also hire vets. I think that there's a huge pool of talent, especially in the military, of people coming out and that have incredibly valuable skills, soft skills and technical skills that can be directly applied here too. So not to forget about those guys, because as we're looking to shore up our defense strategy as a nation, you have to really think about where who's the front line here, who's really seeing the full picture or has the missing pieces to fill in the gaps. So I think it starts in your local community, but I also think that there's a huge pool of talent, in our veteran community, and it definitely comes down to opportunities. And really, I think when we look at our internship program, working with students who are coming from, maybe lower income or are not as connected, lives and coming in first generation, second generation, maybe they're not as connected as the Ivy League parents and kids, and so they need that network too. So you have to start thinking strategically how to build these pathways in a lot of dimensions.
Well, yeah, and even maybe some more carrot and stick kind of dynamics that scale the type of coding programs and career pathways programs that you've been able to work here in locally too. That came up in specific, didn't it? The idea of an incentive program around coding, and I thought it was a great idea. So thanks. But Adrian, the announcement earlier today around the Google certification kind of collaborative. I mean, I was hoping you could talk us through a little bit more of that in terms of how that came about and just the opportunities for the further integration with the like K through 12 and beyond kind of curriculum.
Sure. How it came about, I guess, is very complicated, and I won't bore you with all of the details. But I think that at Google, I've been there almost 7 years, and the entire time that I've been there, I've been working on educational programs of different kinds, and trying a bunch of different things that some worked, some didn't. And I think the career certificates are sort of like the culmination of a bunch of different ideas from different teams. And the basis of the idea really is give young people hands-on experience, which sounds like kind of a duh, but in a lot of ways, it's something that industry hasn't, having that sort of industry-informed perspective at a younger age, and having, especially for those going into more technical roles, hands-on experience doing the work for which they're trying to be hired later is the #1 resume builder and the #1 set of skills that recruiters are looking for in the high-tech industry. So when our recruiters go and look at resumes, you see two students with, two different resumes. One went to CSU Fullerton, one went to San Diego State, let's say, and they both got 4.0s and they both have a CS degree and they're both applying. How do you differentiate these? Those two students are functionally the same. They've both taken the same sort of set of classes, et cetera. And the #1 thing that recruiters are looking at are, have they done project-based learning? Have they built things before? Are they contributing to the open source community? And right now I'm only talking about technical roles, not non-technical roles are sort of similar thing. But really the Google Career Certificates idea comes from knowing that in order to give students greater opportunities, we have to give them access to the tools and the technologies early on so that they can actually use these things, so that they can supplement their own sort of experience in education. Which is not to say that this is a way around formal education, because it's not. It's designed to be embedded. Like, no one's trying to make a teacher obsolete here. Like, you all know teachers are absolutely integral to this program, the functioning of this program. And the reason for that is because it's not just the technical skills, it's the soft skills too. It's the project management, it's the creative problem solving, it's the persistence I was talking about earlier. So in a lot of ways, and I know this is a very long-winded answer at this point, but in a lot of ways, the Google Career Certificates is an attempt to take project-based learning, put it embedded inside of a formal education model, and then, in order to give students access to things that they, industry-informed ways of problem solving, and industry-informed ways of working, so that they have that sort of practical experience that gives them a leg up. So that by the time they do get to the point where they're ready to apply to a job or take those set of life skills somewhere else in a completely different direction, they have that hands-on experience that otherwise is really very hard to get, unless you're somehow very well connected. For those of us out there who don't have a strong network of, Ivy League folks around them, or who don't have access to a computer at home, or for those of us who don't even know what a software engineer does.
Right.
Having those people in front of you is so important, because we can't be what we can't see. That's the expression. I think it's absolutely true. So the Career Certificates is attempting to do all of that, which is quite a tall order.
Michael, and then maybe Neil too, maybe talk to us a bit about the urgency that you saw and met in terms of meeting and to fill the opportunity gap with kind of the skills enhancement and skill-based learning, employer partnerships. Like, how did that system of investments and partnerships, come about?
It's not easy, but I think the key takeaway, hopefully, for our audience, which not only it's internal, we're speaking to a lot of our own people, our parents, our teachers, but external as well. I know there are other people from outside watching this, because people now, because of the Google partnership, are asking AUHSD, like, how did you guys do that? And I think that the number one piece is it needs to, and this answers the urgency. If we're truly serious about the urgency, we need to make this a priority and integrate it during the school day. And we being the K-12 system, cannot do that alone without the partnerships that you see up here, without the community college, and to build those systems internally based on relationships, based on trust, and it does take courage because I think one of the problems and challenges, not only in the state of California, but across this country, we have spent 20 years with the wrong drivers. Too much emphasis on teaching to the test, on a test score, distilling all of the talent that we saw demonstrated with the students from Kennedy and Cypress and who presented into a multiple choice test score. You're not going to get a kid that we saw without all the work, all the integrated work, beginning with the teachers having the freedom to allow the atom noms to create a shusher, right, in 7th and 8th grade rather than teaching to the test. So I think that is really foundational in terms of the message to scale up. And that's why we're so proud of the partnerships with the folks that you see up here and the institutions across the district.
And I think it's a lot of this is I call it an infrastructure problem. So a lot of things you hear Superintendent Matsuda talking about and the other panelists talking about are all very relevant. And if you look at it from the flip side, there are companies and other organizations that want to partner and provide, after school or supplementary, whatever they can do to try and help upskill the students. The challenge is many of those, people don't know how academia works and some of the challenges. So even like the stuff that we've done together, like with the Saturday workshop program, for Matsuda, he worked really hard to, cultivate and get buy-in with his team across the board. And I think without that level of buy-in, we wouldn't have seen the success that we actually had. So we need the bilateral partnership. We need the buy-in from both sides. We need the infrastructure, which is more than just access to equipment and APIs and technology. That's important. But we also need the ability to do the follow-on, or the way to let the students be able to move forward. Because too often I see you come in like during engineering week, and they do a little cool project, some of the kids are really excited, and then they have no outlet to take it forward, right? Especially with underserved communities, they may not have access to a computer or a teacher that has free time to engage on some of these things. And I think that was actually one of the things, again, that we did that was so powerful, because, yeah, we do the Saturday workshop, and then you have a few of the teachers reserve time in the Monday class to have a discussion about some of the things that were discussed and some of the things the students thought about over the weekend. So I think to be successful ultimately, yeah, and to attract industry leaders, you're talking about Matt and vice versa, it's a bilateral partnership, not focused on curriculum, focused on infrastructure, but at the end of the day, everyone is committed to the goal of improving outcomes for students.
Yeah, Joseph and Adrian and Dr. Thomas, I think you kind of talked about kind of the untraditional pathway a bit, and how this model has really helped kind of provide enhanced opportunities to folks. But is it just from the bottoms up that we build these kind of pathways, through the K through 12 system for students without traditional technical backgrounds? Like, how do you bridge some of that gap in terms of, bottom up efforts with kind of some top-down supports? Anybody?
I have a perspective on this, but I'm sure there are many perspectives on this, so I will offer one. I think what you're describing is a systemic problem.
Right.
So systemic problems, if they're going to be solved, require systemic solutions. So I think that is to say, bottoms up is great. Like we definitely need investment in K through 12. We definitely need investment in education. We definitely need infusion of money and to create these opportunities. But we also have to, speaking as myself and not the Google part right now, we also need companies to change. We need them to recognize that the way that they, for example, have sourced talent in the past doesn't work. We need them to change their hiring process. We need them to open their minds to the places where there's sort of hidden talent, hidden to them, not to us. And not to us in this room. In this room, that's why we're here, right? But I think that, traditionally, going back to my example of that recruiter looking at these two resumes, those are the folks that need to understand what the work on these resumes represent. And I think we've erred too much on the side of the easy solution. It's easy to go to an Ivy League school and pick someone who's smart. That's easy. But it requires some significant thought, some significant problem solving, some significant systemic intervention from the top down as well. So I often feel like as educators, and I felt this when I was an educator, the burden was like all on me. Like I've got to solve this problem, I got to get these kids to college, I got to get them through their degree, I got to make sure they can write this essay, they got to pass the test or whatever. And that's true, but it would be really nice if there were some folks on the top that were working just as hard as you all are. So that's the message I evangelize, and hopefully some people will listen. But I think ultimately it has to be both, because this is not a problem that one group of people can solve.
Pick that up from Adrian. So I completely agree that bottoms-up approach, but then top-down can't be ignored. And I think for a firm like Loco, where we're doing pioneering work, I mean, there's no blueprint to how to build these things that we're doing. And so our criteria when we hire is very different than a normal kind of traditional Fortune 500 or tech company. So we're looking for uniqueness, and really hands-on experience is where it's at. And so I think that when we look at our community and how we can give back to foster these pathways, it is absolutely working with high schools and Superintendent Matsuda and the visionary pathways that they've created here, but also it has to lead to something substantial. So I do appreciate the Google certificate programs that are starting to become into the program as well. I think that at the community level, college level as well, that there's some work that could be done there. They move very quickly and can adapt to these new kind of programs. Not to say that the four-year universities are antiquated, but working within that system can be very challenging for not only students, but also for startups like us, where we are looking to recruit faster. I can't wait 4 years for you to get a degree and then be in debt and then be desperate to take a job. Like, we want them fresh, we want to identify them young so they can move faster, and the education can come. If you want to fill in the university, that's cool, but I think there needs to be different pathways that are created at a much more grassroots level in your community, and working directly with the organizations and the startups and the people who want to get started sooner. So that's where I think that we align quite a bit, is just breaking down the kind of structure that's been there and finding these unique pathways that are kind of naturally forming due to the absolute need that's coming from industry, but also for the future for these kids.
Well, I 100% agree. I've been also preaching that, there has to be a partnership between industry and academia. And me going through the educational system, it was always portrayed to me as it's binary. I have to do academia or I have to do industry. And that's unfair to today's student. I think today's student is so different than yesterday's student or the student before that generation, especially at the higher ed level. Students are not all students, I should say, I don't want to be absolute, but most students, at least that I know, are working. And we have to be mindful of that, and we also need to adapt to that and understand what learning needs are necessary. And that's probably more on the higher ed perspective, but I'm sure there's a lot of that, at the high school level as well. And, I think, while education needs to be mindful of that, but also industry, as already noted, we have to make sure that when we're looking at resumes, one thing that I think is really important, it's okay if they don't check all of the boxes, because they will grow into that role. But also in the education realm, we also have to be able to train students how to fill out or how to complete their resumes. What are some interviewing tips and tricks? A lot of my Saturdays and Sundays are spent helping students with these things that they have no idea how to go about this. And that's not a ding on the educational system. It's just we need to be more mindful of that. But then also on my side, on the industry side, we also may need to help them connect dots as well, because there's so many skills that are transferable, but we also have to be mindful of the inequities that are included in all across the board. But yes, I think there's very like-minded people up here, and I think that's why we're all here, because we want to see this grow. We want to see this expand, especially today's student is inundated with data, and we have to know how to process that and how to manage that.
Yeah, you mentioned like interviewing skills and some of those, more traditional like soft skills that we talk about. Are we thinking about and integrating soft skills, or have we drawn up too many walls around kind of these interconnection points around curriculum? Are we integrating soft skills in as much as we should?
Yeah, one distinction that I'll make, and this is just my personal view, I personally don't like the term soft skills because I think it gives us the opportunity to put it over here. I think they're essential skills, and I think that they need to be taught. I do think that a lot of the essential skills are being included and they are being looked at. But I would say that there needs to be a more access to those skills when it comes to project management-based items, or, instead of looking at, okay, we have to check all of these boxes. This is how you're going to ace an interview, or this is how you're going to write the best resume to get noticed or to distinguish yourself. And even in the workplace and industry, I will tell you that a lot of times soft skills translates into gender, and that's a big problem. And so I think that, and I'm not speaking about any particular company, I'm just saying in general, I've seen that, and I've seen that those types of skills, they're dismissed. And then therefore there's a focus on other hard skills or technical skills, and those are the folks that get rewarded. But actually, we need to be teaching the essential skills, because those are just as important, if not more important in some cases.
Any other best practices or comments on soft skills? Michael, we spoke a bit on the call earlier too about also the complementary focus that we need to have on teacher talent and resources to scale these types of programs, like the technical skills, the kind of coding and AI background. Do you want to address some of that dynamic in terms of the needed resources and investments that help support this program?
Yes, but I want to go back to what
Please.
About soft skills. We call it the 5 C's. I think that we have spent this district has spent the last 6 years integrating those skills into the classroom, into instruction. And I'd like to really commend many of the teachers here in doing just that. In fact, we've been working with Mr. Tim Wynn and Matt Coleman on creating a system of integration, which I think is going to, and we'd love to share that with our friends from Google too, because I think it's really, we feel we're a cutting edge district nationally in terms of building these types of partnerships, but we are working on the integrating those soft skills into the classroom, into the grade book with evidence. And there are a number of districts across the state, across the country, that are interested in doing the same thing. And there's no reason why we each should have to reinvent the wheel. We're inventing it here. We know we're ahead. And, we want to really work with our partners because we've identified, I think, what the problem is, right? We have the entire K-12 system has really the wrong drivers. They're not aligned to the world of work and the world of life. And that's what we're attempting to do.
Any other insights on the talent, the resources, the investments,
I guess I would add too that for those of you that remember back before lunch, which seems like a long time ago, when I was speaking, I was saying that, at Google there's a sort of joke, but it's also a bit of a truism that you write like one line of code a day and you spend the rest of the time sort of discussing that. Imagine how hard to do that would be if you hadn't spent any time in your formal education or elsewhere developing the soft skills. I also am not a fan of the term because it does feel gendered, and I could talk about that for many hours. But I won't, luckily for you. But I think that this is a sort of crucial thing that some folks kind of is a misperception about business, and maybe even particularly the tech industries, is there's sort of myth of like I said, like the Mountain Dew slamming, hoodie wearing tech bro who's just in the dungeon like typing away code, when the reality is the candidate that we're looking for is much more socially engaged. Like, coding is a team sport, and it requires a lot of, I know this might scare some students who might be listening, but you have to know how to write too. Writing, critical thinking, reading comprehension. You may, you have your English teacher telling you, like, you got to read this Midsummer Night's Dream because trust me, you'll thank me later, and you're like, come on, like, but they're right. They're right. Those are fundamental skills that are just as important as the other, like the project-based learning and the hands-on coding. That's all wonderful, and it's more of it is needed. But a truly like industry-informed perspective would be holistic, because when you're at work, you have to do all of those things. You have to get along. You have to work as a team. You have to know how to give and receive feedback. These are all skills. They don't come naturally. And I think sometimes when we act like they do come naturally, we are discriminating, actually, against people who don't have the opportunity for that same kind of education. That's another point that I will leave to the side, because that's a long story, too. But I think that, this is very important to think about, like, holistically.
From an investments standpoint, this came up a bit earlier, and Neil, I mean, being at the UC system, what do you see there, and I guess on down the education pipeline in terms of the need in investments that support, more of this curriculum, like, really tangible R&D investments? Do we need more maker spaces? Do we need more personnel and teachers? Like, what's the higher education investment quandary?
Well, we need all of that and more. I mean, one of the biggest challenges actually is that, as designed today, the UC system, most universities, even to some level the K through 12, are not designed to move fast, right? We're used to change happens and there's time to react and so forth, but like in the UC system, if you want to create a new class, it's a 2-year process. So by the time your class is approved, it's already outdated. And so, again, I keep talking about infrastructure. Some of these things is that we have to adapt our own systems to actually meet this. Maker spaces, incubators, more labs, more teachers, professors, they're all helpful. But if we don't direct it, and put all the stuff there, it's not going to be very effective. It's like you own a Ferrari, right? But you have no destination in mind, and there are no roads to drive on, and there are no gas stations. So unless we put all the pieces together, we're not going to actually get very far with any of this. And that's, I think, one of our biggest challenges. I think looking out, I know a lot of people look at it, oh my God, he's just telling us this is so hard, we have no magic bullet solution. It's true, there is no magic bullet solution for this. I know we're all heads down with our work, and I know that we've got plenty on our plates just trying to keep the lights on. But I think this is the real struggle. Just throwing more people isn't going to solve the problem. Throwing more money isn't just going to solve the problem. This is an ecosystem type of solution. We need everyone to come together and partner together to make this work, right? And if you're all hoping that someone will figure it out and we can kind of play follow the leader, by the time someone figures it out and you start to play catch up, that solution's probably already outdated. So it's really on all of us, everybody in this room, to come together and figure out the best way to move forward and continually move forward. And I think the fact that all of you people here today are in this room tells me that you don't want to make this happen, you realize that we need to make this happen. So kudos to you.
I wanted to add to that. One of the things that I've always envisioned in Orange County in general was to create a nonprofit Artificial Intelligence Institute. So it's something that's always been on my mind as far back as when we founded Loco. So if anyone wants to talk about that or has interest, I think this is a worthy discussion that flows right into what Neil was saying. I think there's a big need to create new opportunities and to create new kind of organizations that are tied into the community and are not out for a profit, but really the profit of giving the knowledge to students and to creating new ways of getting them into careers and new ways into the field.
Yeah, I think San Diego, the San Diego Foundation just launched a very similar initiative around some sector-based economic development. I forget what it was around though. Michael, did you have some thoughts on that too? I thought you had your hand up, sorry. In that sense, where is this industry, where is this conversation heading? We hear a lot of conversation about the metaverse and the expansion of jobs and jobs that we don't know. where is this going in terms of jobs that we haven't even begun to think about yet?
I'll jump in. I mean, I think that's exactly what I was talking about, hybrid intelligence. It's not so much worrying about what exactly the precise jobs are going to be. We know what they're going to entail, and that's essentially augmenting the work that we're able to do with these machine capabilities. And so, just generally speaking, we know that we're going to have to get better at critical thinking. We're going to have to get better at the essential skills. We're going to have to be better at being creative, right? Everyone, I know that not everyone wants to be a programmer or a roboticist or like that, but everyone has to have a basic understanding of the toolbox, the technical capabilities, because there's no way to wield that otherwise, right? We all need to know an industry, some domain expertise. So when it comes to the future of work, it's different. It's not just you learn math, you learn English, you learn Spanish, right? It's about now interweaving all these subjects together, weaving these skills together so that we can actually be able to do something.
Yeah, I'd like to tag on to that. I think, empowerment is really important, and, allowing students to be gap fillers. One thing that I did publish earlier this year, it was entitled, "You Don't Have to Be a Rocket Scientist to Work on Rockets."
So cool.
And I think that it's really important to understand, just from the 100,000 foot level, what is in the art of the possible. So we actually have doctors of education working on rockets. We have people who studied teaching their entire lives and that are credentialed, and they are working on rockets. We have in-house fashion designers and internal or interior designers that really help a positive workspace, and they create our swag, our t-shirts. That get us all together and rallying together. I can't say that was where rocketry was going in the 50s and 60s, but that's where we are today. And so I think allowing students to come up with great ideas and empowering them to experiment, and I say the word fail very lightly because failure is just another opportunity to learn and grow. But to let them experiment with that, then the students are teaching us on how we can equip them to help them to grow.
I would add to that, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay, thanks. And this is just sort of a different way of saying what I think you two are already saying, but I think what is sort of unique about this historical juncture is that we don't know the answer to your question yet. We don't actually know yet exactly. We have some ideas, but we don't know exactly. It's not like, like my grandfather was a cop, and his dad was a cop, and being a cop felt very easy to do in the sense it's just like a job, and you go and do it, and it has this sort of like prescribed norms, more or less. And this is back in the day before anyway, I don't want to go down that road. Anyway. Again, I keep bringing up these different conversations. Sorry about that. Or like a bank teller. Like a bank teller, before you sit in a bank, you cash the checks, you give out the money. It's fairly straightforward. What's unique about right now is that we don't know what these roles are going to be. We don't know what they're going to look like. And part of what's exciting for students right now is that you're going to tell us what these roles are. You're going to tell us what you're going to do. It's not the other way around. Maybe for the first time in history, you're going to tell us what the job is. And so these skills, the very ones that you all are bringing up, are so important as a basis, and these experiences are so important as a basis because it's that skill set and those sets of experiences that are going to uniquely come together in each of you, and then you're going to say like, oh, I'm going to go work on rockets, and I'm going to do this very specific thing that probably doesn't exist right now. Mm-hmm. So that's, to me, a really, really exciting moment to be in.
Michael, I did see your hand.
Yeah, so I look at it both from an organizational standpoint as well as the individual students, right? So the organizational standpoint, you're dealing with the K-12 bureaucracy, right? That's the way most public schools operate. They operate and they're very comfortable in the status quo. Whereas we need to have the mindset of a startup. We need to be nimble, and we need to be able to pivot as the economy pivots and operating in this uncertain world. And so we call, there's a lot that we've learned from the business side, in terms of classic Peter Senge learning organizations. That's what we're attempting to do internally with our district. And it takes a lot of systemness, it takes a lot of healthy transparency internally, right, at an organizational level to be like a startup. That's a huge mental model shift. But then what we want for the kid is what we saw exhibited today, which is an example of the soft skills, the 21st century transferable skills. We call it the 5 C's, and that's why it's so vital that our teachers are integrating those soft skills during the school day. Again, this is not extra credit or after school. This is happening during the school day. And I'm really proud of the work that we've done in the last 6 years to get there. There's enough of our admins, there's enough of our teachers, enough of our parents, enough of our students who are exhibiting that. And that's, I think hopefully that's the takeaway, and that's a takeaway for our partners here, to see a district in an urban setting that's unionized, but that is beginning to act like a startup, and I'm really proud of that.
Joseph, I think that's a great question to you. I mean, you started a tech company in the middle of a pandemic. What's your mindset on that soft skills question there around the leadership dynamics that it takes to thrive kind of in this rapidly changing space?
A lot of tenacity. I think you have to be very nimble and fast on your feet. We're able to do things at Loco because of our small size and just the mindset of our employees that larger tech firms cannot absolutely do. So we can outpace people because of the nimbleness, but we take great care to hire the right people. So it always comes down fundamentally to a cultural fit. You might have the technical skills, you might have great education, great resume, but ultimately we have a unique culture at Loco that allows us to move quick and attack with ferocity. And so that's why we're so successful. And I think pandemic accelerated that. Not only did it accelerate the need for our technology, but it accelerated our culture and the way that we look at the world and how we have to be nimble as well when we hire. So now we have 2 remote employees, and before I would have told you absolutely not, they have to be in the office, but you can't take that attitude anymore. For us, we know when we come across someone that has those unique qualities that really fit into our culture. The Locos kind of have their own, they definitely have their own say in who enters our very small startup. So I take everyone's input when we make these decisions because it's all valuable. We work as a flat organization. It's really, I might be the CEO and I make some of the bigger decisions, but when it comes down to the personal stuff and who you want to be working with on these really hard problems, 24/7, of course they have a huge say. I don't want anyone to disrupt that dynamic. So I think we've found ourselves to be very flexible and adaptive to the changing, needs of how the industry is moving, how the country is in the state and the place that it is. And if you're not, then you're really behind the curve because you have to kind of be ahead of this stuff and kind of anticipate what are the things that people are going to expect of you as a company and the kind of benefits and the kind of flexibility you're going to have to their unique challenges. So we try our best. I'm not to say that we do it perfectly, but I think it's an ongoing learning process, and our culture, it really comes down to our culture. Like, we take great care to hire and find the people that really add to the culture and don't disrupt it in any way.
Yeah, please.
If I could build upon what Joseph's saying, we all actually have this ability to be adaptable and flexible, right? In 2015, the first time I addressed the United Nations, I was warned that they think it's Terminator time. Machines are going to rise up, conquer the world, eradicate humanity. So I gave a little more optimistic speech, but I was really talking about how AI can be used for public services, and already is, and how it can be used for sustainable development goals. For my 30-minute speech that night, I was approached by the leadership, and the Secretary General was like, we never thought about using the technology. I think there's something here. I want to figure this out. I'm thinking, yeah, right, okay, UN, big, bureaucratic, slow-moving government agency. I kid you not. 4 months after that talk, we had the MVP for the AI for Good initiative. We actually had stuff in market. And we've since obviously learned, grown, and scaled upon that, that we have like 116 active projects going on today with an army of worldwide volunteers. But it shows you that even an organization like the United Nations, when they believe something is important enough, you know, helping people and planet, they're willing to set aside the red tape and figure out a way to actually make it happen, to be nimble, to be agile, because the goals, the outcome is just too important, and they know we have a short window. They're like, we have a short window to change, turn things around. Let's just make it happen.
You know, we talked a lot today about, you know, the dynamic of K through 12 and even up into the community colleges and a bit even into higher ed. But, you know, COVID has really accelerated a lot of the inequities in our society, especially in Black and brown communities. And it's displaced a tremendous amount of workers. And we say at the Institute a lot that COVID has accelerated, you know, fill in the blank, especially the future of work. You know, what is the space here in terms of opportunities for displaced workers and reskilling, even you know, for the older generation of folks that, you know, find themselves looking for a new career? Uh-oh.
I'll jump in then. Obviously, there's a lot of training education out there through like Google and Microsoft and Coursera and all these things. I think that the challenge that a lot of people are trying to either upskill or reskill is they don't know what direction to take it, or they're not sure they can actually do this. There's so much things have become tech-oriented. A lot of people think they have to be a technologist to be able to do these things.
Yeah.
And that's not really the case. And I think that's one of the messages we actually have to impress upon people to realize that. And I know that you look at the adult education, continuing education that's being offered, again, it's very narrowly focused, right? We'll teach you machine learning, or we'll teach you security architecture, or we'll teach you to be a person that collects requirements. And it's like, I think without that holistic picture where people can understand what is really going on, the pieces that go and make that happen, they don't know where they fit into the puzzle, so to speak. And I think that's one area that we're actually constantly failing at as just an academic overall ecosystem is historically we've never been good to explain to students or prospective students why some of the things we want to teach you are actually important, how they actually get used in your career and your life. And I think we need to solve that problem to help people that were displaced by COVID. We need to solve that problem for our students today. Because my own experience is teaching is if they know how this stuff actually gets used, they get more engaged. Because they know that there's a destination they're going to get to, and this is why this is important learning, rather than, okay, I took this class, and then 2 years later, oh, shoot, I have to know this for my job. I don't really remember what I learned.
Yeah, that's a really tough question, I think, to answer. And just from my own observation and experience, I've used this word already, but it goes to empowerment and creativity. And I think that goes to show how much we can and what we have learned in the classroom. As an example, so at the beginning of the pandemic, we actually had a small group of rocket engineers and rocket scientists build ventilators for hospitals in California, and we also deployed many out to Africa. And that took creativity. That's a completely different industry, and it was able to get FDA approved to support and to help and be a part of the solution. Now, yes, there's resources, and I understand that it's not as simple for other folks. However, I do believe in the power of creativity and collaboration, And the more that we can experience that at a young age, the more we can pull together in times of crises. A lot of leaders have said this, but we are truly stronger together. So if we see displaced folks, or if we see something that's spiraling out of control, there's probably a wealth of skill sets that we can really leverage and pull on. I mean, even with our company, you know, we were just started in 2017, and we launched successfully twice in the middle of a pandemic, with folks being remote. Now we had some folks on site, but we had to completely change our overall operating structure to keep our teammates safe and healthy. So that took a lot of creativity. And, you know, that was hard because there's different generations that are coming together, and we have to find common ground. And to me, that's rooted in what we've learned and how we were brought up as students as well. So really leveraging that creativity, I think, is a start that probably only scratches the surface of your question, but again, just that overall empowerment.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to kind of the systemic solution that we've all been kind of addressing throughout here. You know, we're getting kind of close to the end of this session, so I want to get some final thoughts and maybe a bit of a call to action out of this. And we've heard from some amazing kids today who are working in different aspects of this program. Like what, Michael, we'll start at the back. What would you say to the kids? And from your perspective, like, is there a call to action? Is there a need for support in terms of scalability?
Well, I think the message to our young people is to develop a mindset really for lifelong learning. You heard that it's a very uncertain world out there. Fortunately, we have companies like Google that are trying to fill the gap of continuous learning. And I think that's and a love of learning and a curiosity about problem solving. So I think that we are on the right track, and as the panelist here said, we don't know what the answers are yet, but we are trying to prepare you for this very uncertain world so you have the skills to continue to move forward.
Joseph, any kind of final thoughts or next steps?
Yeah, well, we talked about this, Michael, a little bit, of the teachers also getting accreditations and to continue their knowledge. In order to scale this internship that we've started with Kennedy, you would really need technical people to run it. And not, we're a very small, unique firm, but how do you scale something nationwide, for instance, with this internship? It'd be very challenging right now. So we're still figuring it out, but kind of one of the fundamental things would be to provide, teachers really are the talent scouts here. They know their students, they know who's attracted to this space and has interest. And I think it starts with them too, is that if they're the talent scouts, they should also want to step up and continue their education and get certifications and maybe a unique certificate around something like this, an AI or machine learning, to be able to carry the torch forward and to run internships by themselves at the school. So I think it comes down to lifelong learning, with students and teachers alike. I don't think it ever stops. We're in the age, this revolution that's happening around us. You can't get complacent. You really have to keep pushing forward and be determined to absorb knowledge and transmit knowledge. Yeah, Adrian, any insight, final thoughts around, especially that bridging that untraditional pathway? Your insight there is really powerful.
Yeah. Parting thoughts, no pressure or anything.
Right.
Better be good.
Fix everything.
I think, I mentioned before that I think we're sort of at this historical, like on the cusp of like a significant historical moment where the nature of work is changing. And this is something people have said over and over again today. And I mentioned that, the students of today are going to really shape in ways that I don't even think any of us in this room are able to predict, like what all that is going to look like. But I think, the best advice I would give to a student is don't discount the significance of this change. I know it's hard. When I was 16 or 17, I didn't care. I mean, you couldn't have paid me to sit all day in this room. I would have been off doing something. I would have been surfing or something. So it's for those of you who are still here, congratulations. You're already doing great. But, you know, I think for parents too, like when I was a kid, my grandma was always like, "You're going to be a doctor or a lawyer," and that was seen in my family as like, or a teacher, of course. Like that was how you were going to go make money. Like that was the economic opportunity, and I didn't do any of those things really. So whoops. But what I would say to kids today is like, we are at this place where AI is the new that. If that makes sense. Like if you want to make a good living and you want to change your life and you're a first generation college student in particular, or you want to pull your family up, or you want to create something for yourself, there's a lot of opportunity here. And it doesn't mean that you have to be just good at math or something. Like there's a lot of space here to do something that feels meaningful. And also for kids today, there's a lot of space to create something new. Like I was saying before, like jobs are kind of opening up. The way that we interact with work is changing. We work from home now. We have all these sort of different ways of working. And within that, there's a lot of opportunity to try something new, to do new things, to define new jobs, to have new roles at companies that don't even exist yet, to do things not for profit too, because not everything has to be, not everything ought to be for profit, please. And so I think that my advice here is don't automatically discount AI because it sounds mathy or it sounds technical. If that's not your thing, that's totally fine, but there's still nevertheless a lot of opportunity here if you're someone who's creative, or you like to solve problems, or you really care about social justice, because that's really where there's an intersection here that I think is really, really important. So I don't know if that's a final thought, but I will stop there.
It's a great one. Neil, what about, what advice do you have for the next master innovator?
I will say to all those students, you guys have an incredible superpower. It's much stronger than anyone up here on this panel, no offense guys, and most of the people in the room. You guys have a fresh set of eyes, right? We've learned things, we've done things, but we're also used to some things being the way they are. You guys can actually find that different way of doing things. You guys can be amazing, disruptive thinkers and drive real innovation. You can probably leverage AI and other technologies in ways we haven't fathomed yet. And that's where I think the real change, the real innovation is going to drive from. So use it. Use that superpower. And, talk about a call to action. I have a challenge for every person in the room and watching the stream. I know you've been hit with a lot of information today. I challenge you to think about what's one small thing you can do to make this happen, right? To bring, this AI capability and get people ready for future work. There's one small thing each of us can do. What's the one small thing you'll do? And Mike will check that homework assignment on Monday.
Dr. Thomas, especially around the prospect for increased representation and programs that support that, what do you say to the kids that are looking for those opportunities and how they can best, access some of those or work to increase those opportunities?
Yeah, be authentically and unapologetically who you are. Do not conform, truly. And I say that speaking in experience. As a kid, I was told that I was terrible at math and that I should find something else. The last 15 years, that's how I've made my living. So it took me a minute to get that realization, and it took me a while to get formally into engineering, but I did not change. I kept at it because I was passionate about it and I really cared about it. And I will tell you that passion will take you a long way regardless of whatever barriers you face, no matter what, because I've lived it and I've done it, and I started at a very low level and worked my way all the way up because of my passion. Similarly to that, I would say celebrate your peers, be collaborative, do not be cutthroat, and only compete with yourself.
Wow.
And that will take you further than what you can even imagine. And it's really about dreaming wildly, but planning ferociously, and just making it happen for yourself while asking a ton of questions along the way. I still ask questions every single day, over and over, to make sure that I understand and that I have retained that information, because that's how I grow and that's how I learn. And if you're not sure how to do that, find a mentor. And if you don't know how to find a mentor, my name is on the screen. You can find me on any social media platform and I will direct you in the right place.
What a great way to end this. And I think the student ambassadors have a small token that they'd like to present, yes? So we'll stay up here for that. Should we come down for a picture? How do you want to do it? Oh, yeah, please do. Absolutely. I've been up here too long.
Sorry to steal the spotlight. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abdullah Fatahi, and I'm serving as the student representative to the Board of Trustees for the 21-22 school year. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm here now to thank you so much on behalf of the 29,000 students of our district, to everyone here for participating in a historical moment for our own district. It is becoming more clear than ever that artificial intelligence is the future, and the Anaheim Union District is making massive strides in giving us students those opportunities. Thank you to everyone that made today possible, and all the partners that are supporting the future of our community. And finally, I'd like to take this moment to thank and honor the distinguished guests here with me today. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our amazing panelists. Superintendent Michael Matsuda, we got a few plans. Mr. Joseph Zaki, Ms. Adrienne Posner, Mr. Neil Sohoda, sorry. Dr. McKaylin Thomas, and finally, Mr. Matt Horton. Down there. Thank you all so much for having me here today.
Thank you. Michael, I know you were going to come up and do final thoughts, and thanks again for including me here. It was a really great honor to be here, and thanks to our panel.
I think we also have something for Amy. Amy, could you come up here? Where is she? Amy Kwan? Yay, Amy. You know, I started off by sharing the myth of, the Greek myth this morning, Prometheus. And it was all about the gift of fire. And again, because of this distinguished panel of speakers, we all have the awareness of that fire called artificial intelligence. And I think the big takeaway for all of us is it's now up to us to use it wisely. On behalf of the Anaheim Union High School District, our Board of Trustees, and our 29,000 students and 3,000 employees, I want to thank our guests today for really, really giving us that fire so that we can light the way forward. Thank you so much. So make sure you have your parking stamped, right? And we want to